There's so much healing on so many different levels happening in the world. And one of the big ones, obviously, is sort of, how you show up for yourself in your life, and how relationships are such a magnifying glass for that. And that's why I think this book is so brilliant. I've talked to a few people about it, and especially about talking to you, and they're like, man, I need to read that book. So I would imagine that on top of doing the digital stuff you've been doing and taking care of the land, like writing a book is like such a big project. And okay, so tell me, like, Becoming the One is your book. Tell me about it. Was it intentional, or did it feel like you had to write this book? Like, what was the birth of this?
I was approached by so many publishers. It felt like a sign for me that it was time, because I've always wanted to write a book and I've always been a writer. But, when do you have the time to write a book? It's like, when do you have time to have a baby? Like, it's the same. There's no right time, because you just have to do it. I just decided, okay, I'm going to do this now. If just something felt right. And I began kind of flailing, actually. Like I got a book deal and everything was just so easy. It almost like fell into my lap. But then I felt really confronted with my own self-doubt, and I had a lot of resistance, and I just had to work through that for a while. And then eventually Ben and we went to Hawaii, and we stayed there for the winter. And I remember just sitting on the couch and being like, I can't do this. I'm going to quit. I'm just going to give my advance back. I'm not a writer. Like, I was really hitting a wall, and I was crying, and he just sat with me and held space and was like, okay, well, if that's what you need to do. And normally he would push me, but he just didn't. And then he held space for me to do breath work. And that day I sort of just moved through it. And then I began writing, and I wrote the whole first manuscript in 4 months. And then we spent about a year editing and teasing it out and adding essence and all of that. And so it was an interesting journey, because I saw a block that I didn't know was there in me. And so I had to work through that. And I think that's the beauty of doing things that challenge us and that push us to our edge. Right? Because so often you hear, like, you're going to hit resistance when you're on the precipice of doing something big. And sometimes it's so deeply unconscious that you don't even know it's there. So I had this really cool opportunity to get to the edge of quitting, and then to move forward and to do it. And by the end of it, I fell in love with the process of writing this book. I felt like I was deeply connecting with the people reading it. I was infusing essence in every page, and it just felt so medicinal to work with it. And at the end, I wrote, an outline for another manuscript, because I was just like, this is what I love. Like, I want to write books. This is what I want to do.
Healing is, I've found, to be very hard, and it feels there's a lot of pain, crying, confusion, frustration, lost, all kinds of things. I wonder if we have to go through the fire to come out the other side. And so you're talking about writing a book to help people become the one in their relationship, to write a book. And you had to go through your own fire to do that. And I really wonder, are there any shortcuts?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that we can heal, grow, and evolve without having to go through the fire?
Well, look, I think there is a bit of a yes and to that. For sure, most of the time, growth comes through challenge. Right. And that's why relationships are our greatest spiritual growth container, but they're also the hardest. Right. So, like, if you go be a monk or a nun, like, it's probably easier to become enlightened because you don't have to deal with any interpersonal drama. Right. You can get there, and you can have growth experiences, and it can be gentler if you have guidance, if you have, a core connection to self, if you have people that you can trust who can guide you. And sometimes it really is just going to be hard and painful and stinky. Embracing that is part of the medicine to life. Remembering that it's not a bad thing. And it's actually, even though it feels uncomfortable to get messy, to lay it all out on the table, it's actually a gift, because we're sort of de-armoring in those moments, and we're really letting what's true come through. And we're also letting the people closest to us see us, and be there. So, in my case, like going through the fire, it was really hard, but it also created a lot of intimacy in my partnership. Ben had an opportunity to support me and see a tenderness in me. He said, I've never seen you in self-doubt like that. Like, it's because that's not really my default, like I'm typically quite confident. I just trust what I'm doing. I know that I can do it. I believe in myself. And so when this all came out, it was very new, and he got to see this tender part of me that he had never met too. And so sometimes if we can just look at it as a gift and an opportunity for connection, then it can sort of take the pressure off of it being this like really gross, ugly thing that, we want to sort of skip. Now, it gets a lot harder when we are in denial, when we're in resistance, or when we're not open to letting other people in to support us, or where we are just sort of living completely out of alignment. Then the fire gets hotter and hotter, right? Because the message isn't getting through. So we're just going to keep thrashing around. And so that's why I created this book. And that's why I created my programs too. It's not that you're not going to still have to walk through the fire, but I can walk through it with you. And perhaps some of the things that I share or some of the tools can help lighten the load a little bit, because that's really all that we need, right? We need those friends to walk with us.
To not only not feel alone in the process, but also not feel alone in the pain of like the magnitude of the pain. Because I think what happens is that it gets difficult for people, and then they turn away because they think they shouldn't have to deal with something that bad. They shouldn't feel that way. Like, oh, this must be wrong because I feel so terrible. The feeling is to go back because it's safer and it's more comfortable and it doesn't feel this bad, and bad must be bad. What would you say to someone that was in that space where they feel super lost, or they feel very confused, or they feel really sad? Like, what would you say to them in that moment where they might be willing to go backwards?
Yeah, I mean, I can really relate to that. First of all, like I really empathize with that experience, because I've been in those states where I'm in so much pain that I would rather go back to the comfort zone, even though I was miserable there. Right? Like I felt that way many, many years ago when I was in my own dark night of the soul. That is really what this book is a result of, right? Is all of that healing journey and the stuff that I went through to get here. And so I can remember being in so much pain that I thought I might not make it through. And it's really hard to tell yourself that this makes sense or that this is right. And, I don't believe that, the saying like, everything happens for a reason and like, it's perfect. Like sometimes that's really not going to resonate when there's like a serious tragedy or a serious loss that you just can't make sense of. Right. And you're here now. Like, this is what's happening. Whatever has happened. And so you can't take it back. You're here. And so your only choice is to turn backward and perhaps collapse into yourself, or to expand and to just keep going. And even if that's really slow and gentle, which it should be, you can just keep unfolding. And eventually you see the light. It's not this like forever dark tunnel. I always say pain is a passage, not a prison. Like, you're not going to get stuck there. And I think one of the things that we fear the most when we are in pain is that if we let ourselves fully surrender to this pain, that we might get stuck there, or that we might get so deep that we'll be locked in this depression forever. And I mean, gosh, I can relate to that, and so it's scary to let go because we don't want to lose ourselves. But there is a bit of an ego death happening in these moments too, right? It's like, can we let it go? Can we just surrender to this? Can we let ourselves feel it? What's behind that? And we really can shed a lot of layers in those times of despair. And if we can call on those few people who we love and trust, who can hold us through, and if we can seek solace in the elements and in nature and find ways to connect, then we can feel a little more safe in the process.